The Corsair Flash Voyager Go is the easy way to move photos, music, and videos between your Android device and your PC. Click now to learn more. So the funny thing about that I'm holding a slate right now, click, is that I've actually been working on building this computer since before we even had any practices like slating, or I had my own company and a staff of people, all for the sake of making YouTube videos about computers. And the irony there, I guess, is that we've been doing this professionally all this time and I still can't manage to actually build my own computer and complete it. It's been mostly done for a while, but there were some delays in releasing the video because the LED strips I'm using, these are Phobia UV LED strips. They're actually fairly unique. Most of the LEDs on my original strips actually failed, so we weren't going to be able to film it very well. So I've finally gotten around to swapping them out with some brand new ones, and we are ready to take you guys on a tour of my personal rig. So we'll start with the component selection. The CPU is a 4960X. I don't really recommend Extreme Editions though. Really what I recommend is 4770K if you need hyperthreading, 4570K if you're just gaming, 4 threads is enough. And then if you're doing content creation or any kind of professional work where you can really leverage additional cores, 4930K. Those are the 3 CPUs that are like really the high performance options within Intel's lineup. For the RAM, I'm using Crucial's Ballistics Tracer. This is actually an early revision of the memory that's not really compatible with the X79 platform at all, and has all kinds of problems unless I run it at extremely loose timings and it's all like crappy. I have better RAM. There's definitely RAM that will work better with my board, but for the sheer bling factor, I did go with this stuff. It's not perfect, and it's funny because like Crucial has a utility, so you can program the LEDs on it. Now, by default, they're going to be activity LEDs, so they'll flash slowly if you're not doing much, and then they'll flash really fast if you're doing something really intensive, but you can configure them to do all kinds of different patterns and stuff. Unfortunately, Crucial's missing 2 crucial patterns, and that is off and solid. I don't really want them to flash like this. What I would like is to have the underglow ones solid, the way that they are, and I would like to actually turn the top ones off because I find them a little bit over the top, but I'm still gonna stick with them anyway. For the motherboard, I've got ASUS's Workstation Class LGA 2011 board. This is the new Ivy Bridge E compatible model, P9X79EWS, so the E is the new part. The reason I went with the Workstation Class motherboard is I'm just so sick of consumer grade stuff just not really working right. It feels like the more features anyone tries to add to something, it's like, this router has like beam technology. It like focuses your, antennas like a dish at where your laptop is. Like, I just want something that's a workhorse, workstation grade, and this one does it. It's got the overclocking stuff, it's got a decent audio codec, it's got USB 3, like it's not a server board where it's like green PCB and like 2 USB ports at the back, but it's also not over the top with like OC panels this and voltage checkpoints that. Just plain works. Absolutely love the board. It also has tons of PCI Express expansion. I wasn't sure at the time of originally planning this build if I was gonna go SLI, so that would take up 4 of the slots. And then at the time, I was using a sound card. It's actually still in there, but I don't actually use it anymore. So I was using a sound card. I wanted a 10 gigabit NIC, which I have pulled out now because I don't have a 10 gigabit switch at my house anymore. And finally, I have a RAID card in the rig as well, so I wanted 7 PCI Express slots. So that's another reason to go with a workstation class board like this. It is a little bit on the wider side, which is kind of funny because when I was cutting the hole in the motherboard tray for my 24-pin connector to wrap around, I had to position it as if I might someday put a regular ATX board in, and it still won't show and be ugly. So I had to like squeeze those cables to get them out around the edge of the motherboard because it actually goes over the hole that I cut on the motherboard tray. For the GPU, I'm running a GTX Titan. My original graphics card solution was a 590, or I was thinking about going quad SLI with 590s, but quad SLI just really doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't scale particularly well unless you're running at very, very high resolutions, and it introduces some driver issues that there's just no real solution for other than to turn off SLI. And if I'm gonna put 4 GPUs in my system, we're talking like a couple $1,000s worth of gear. I better be using it all the time or I'm just not gonna put it in. So the only reason I upgraded wanted from the 590, which is actually a faster card than the GTX Titan in terms of raw performance, was that I really wanted game stream for my NVIDIA Shield so that I could stream to myself, and you have to have a Kepler-based GPU for that to work. So the Titan ended up in here because we didn't have duplicates of any other graphics cards. We had 2 Titans, so I was like, okay, the one Kepler that I can actually grab happens to be a Titan, so I threw that in there. We also had a water block for it from Coolants that is absolutely beautiful, so that was why I went with that. I'll talk more about the water cooling after. For the power supply, I have an XFX 1000 watt 80 plus platinum modular power supply that I sleeved myself. I didn't do a great job of the sleeving. You can do much better if you individually sleeve each one. I am using Murder or MDPCX sleeving or whatever that stuff is. I got it from Charles from Murderbox. So I'm using really good sleeving, but I did it a little bit differently than most people. Instead of doing each individual wire, I actually did each sleeve over 2 wires. So you can't get quite as close to the connector this way, but I actually find it looks a little bit cleaner with fewer wires, and it did make the cables less bulky when I was trying to route them around inside, which was important, as you're gonna see when I show you the cable management at the back and how difficult that was. The reason I went with this power supply, this is what, like, the only reason, was that it was based on the same platform as Seasonic's 1000 watt platinum, and that was the first power supply that had the 0 decibel fan feature, so that the power supply actually only turns on its fan when you get to, I think it's around 20 to 30% load. So most of the time, that fan actually doesn't even spin. Speaking of fans that don't even spin, my fan controller is an M-Cubed T-balancer. That's strapped on the back. I'll show you that more later. But on this side, there are 4 fans on the quad radiator in the bottom. That's an old Thermochill PA120.4. Not quite classic Thermochill. It's got the 15 mil spacing, but it's still Thermochill, so it's like old school water cooling high-end junk. So there's 4 down there. Those ones spin all the time. Then there's 2 on a Hardware Labs Black Ice Pro. That is a pretty ancient radiator in the front. That's actually my first water cooling radiator. First one I ever bought with my APOGee block, and I think I just did my CPU the first time. I picked up an MCP 350 pump way back then, and that ended up failing at some point, I think. I don't really like those half-height pumps, the MCP, the DDC series. Not a big fan. I'm using a D5 now, so that one's hidden in the basement. It's got the jankiest anti-vibration mount ever, where actually it just has a little like rubber sleeved wire between it and the side panel so that it doesn't pass any vibration to the case. So I've got a Black Ice Pro in the front that has 2 fans that aren't spinning, and then you may have actually noticed that the 2 fans in the back here are also not spinning. The 2 in the top do spin all the time, so the M-Cube T-balancer takes care of that. So when the system is just running at the desktop or web browsing, most of the fans in it are actually off. And then the other ones are running at extremely low speeds. And then as soon as I ramp up speeds, everything kicks into high gear. So I have 2 temperature sensors, one at the top of the motherboard, and then one that is actually taped with thermal compound between it and the bottom radiator in place so that I can monitor water temperatures and air temperatures within the case, and the appropriate fans react accordingly whenever those temperatures increase. So I don't remember where I was going with that. So RAID card, that's an LSI 9268i. At the time, that was an extremely high-end card, and it was optimized for maximum throughput on large SSD RAID 0 arrays, which brings us to my SSD arrangement. I might not show these to you guys yet, but there are 8 SSDs around the back of the case. What the hey, we might as well just like start cracking this baby open. So there are 8, man, these are tight with the powder coating. I'll talk about the case after, because the case is quite a story. Lots of things altered on that. Oh, I guess I should talk about the side panel before we get into the SSDs. Okay, so the side panel was a nightmare because I don't like plexi side panels because they're not really very clear. They're easy to scratch. You can put micro scratches all over a plexi side panel just by wiping it down with a microfiber cloth. Like, they're just terrible. They're very, very reflective compared to glass, and they're just not as good. But unfortunately, what I wanted was to get someone to cut a glass panel and very, very carefully drill holes so that I could actually mount the glass panel on the back with bolts through the front so it would be extremely secure. They delivered me a piece of glass with all the holes drilled, but I gave them my side panel to do the sizing, and a couple of the holes were actually off on the glass. And you know what they did? They took my side panel, not painted yet, fortunately. They took my side panel and just like widened the holes. So I was like, oh, okay, great. Not only can I not use this because it's gonna look terrible, and the piece of glass broke when they were drilling the last hole or whatever, so not only have you not delivered me a usable piece of glass, you've widened the hole on a side panel that I actually can't replace, because every TJ07 is a little bit different, and Silverstone won't even give you a new side panel because there's a chance it won't fit with the curvature at the front. So what I ended up having to do then is a kind of a more ghetto solution. So I just went to a glass shop, got a regular piece of glass, and they offered to use an industrial double-sided tape to tape it on for me. That's how it's attached. Then I went to Home Depot. I got a couple little finishing nubbin things there, and I just glued them on. So that's how the side panel works. I wish I had a more sort of glamorous story about that. What was I talking about? Right, RAID controller. So I guess this will be my first opportunity to show you guys the horribleness at the back here. It is an absolute rat's nest back there, and part of it's my fault, but part of it is just that there's a lot of cables going on back there. So that is the 8-drive RAID 0 array that powers my personal machine. It is kind of ridiculous. It's actually stupid. Nobody, if people ask me about my personal machine all the time, and I say, just because I'm running something doesn't mean you should, nobody should run this configuration. That is 8 Corsair Force refurbished SSDs running in RAID 0 off of that RAID card. It is pretty much going to fail at some point, but I do nightly backups and I keep almost nothing of substance on it other than maybe the odd save game here and there. So everything else goes off to a NAS. So that's why I have an Intel NIC in here, just for slightly better performance to the NAS. It really doesn't make much of a difference these days, especially because a workstation board like this has an excellent NIC on it already. So the cable management for that was done with one of the case modifications that I had to do, which was cutting cable management holes down at the bottom of the motherboard tray, in addition to the CPU tray cutout that the TJ07 doesn't come with natively, the 24-pin and 8-pin and 6-pin for the graphics card cutouts that are over here on this side, as well as these cable management holes that are cut into the divider between the top of the case and the basement, just so that I can get cables up to the top without using the cable management holes that are included in that divider, because they're quite ugly. You can't really hide the cables there at all. So what kind of performance do I get out of this? Well over 1 gigabyte per second reads and writes, so it's extremely fast. I actually changed over from these SSDs to just a single SSD for a little while because I don't remember, I was doing some kind of maintenance, and I didn't notice immediately that there was a difference, but then when I went back to these ones, I was like, I had forgotten how fast it was. It's actually really, really, really fast. Just, again, not something I really recommend. I do have an optical drive in my system, something that a couple of you have probably noticed by now, and the story there is that I originally added an optical drive to it because I got a great deal on a fairly unique item at the time. LG did an HD DVD / Blu-ray reading drive. It was a couple $100, but I got it for like $100. And it was also a DVD rewriter and a CD writer, I think. I'm not sure if it can, yes. And wait, hold on. Yeah, so it records DVDs and CDs and reads Blu-rays and HD DVDs. And I was like, okay, this is the last optical drive I'll ever need. And it turns out I was right. So it's in there. So the reason that it's still in there is because I only sourced 6 of these. These are original Antec 900 front cage covers. And I only sourced 6 of them, so I didn't have a 7th to put in, even if I did want to take the optical drive out. Plus, the way that that front radiator is mounted with just like a piece of like sticky double-sided Velcro thing rolled up under the bottom so that it like sticks in place, and then Velcro on the bottom of the DVD drive and the radiator stuck to that, I can't really take the optical drive out anyway, so that's why I have one. Yeah, it's not great. So the fan controller, I guess I kind of talked about that already. I'll cover a couple more things about liquid cooling. I'm using Bits Power True Silver 3/8" ID 5/8" OD compressions. I think that 3/8 ID 5/8 OD is pretty much the sweet spot in terms of performance, because if you go lower than that, you go down to like 1/4" tubing, you're going to drop about a degree of performance, maybe 2. And if you go up to 1/2, it doesn't really make a difference. And then the advantage of 3/8 over 1/2 is you can get much tighter bend radii without kinking. So I really, really like thick wall 3/8" tubing, and then these are the compressions that go with it. The other thing is that you get better compatibility by going with 3/8" tubing, because 1/2" compressions, especially if you get thick wall, so 3/4" OD tubing, the compressions to go with those are huge and they barely fit on anything. So that was why I went that route. This is a T-virus reservoir right here. It's a clear outside, and then my original one was actually frosted blue for the double helix inside, but I RMA'd it and they kind of screwed it up. They sent me back a clear one. It actually looks just fine. It used to look a little bit better back when the cathode in there wasn't so faded out. I got to get a new one and get it replaced, but very, very cool item. You can get those from Frozen Q. What else? Ah, yes, fans. Okay, you may have also noticed the complete absence of Noctua fans. Yes, I'm shallow. Part of the problem is not that I don't think Noctua fans can look good. I think they can look good in some machines. In fact, our upcoming Hackintosh build guide is going to have Noctua fans in an H440 from NZXT, and I think it looks really, really sharp in there. But the problem is that it needs to go with the rest of this system, and it just doesn't. So I needed blue fans, and the good news is there are some very high-quality blue fans available. So on my bottom radiator, I'm using the original Silverstone air penetrators. I think they're AP121s or something like that. So what's great about those is they take your airflow and they turn them into kind of like a cyclone, like a funnel of air away from them. And because the basement here only has this intake on the rad, which is, by the way, mounted with Velcro, just on the bottom, so takes the airflow through, and then I want it to push it out the other side, but there's nothing kind of containing that airflow because this is quite open. So I wanted something that is able to direct airflow like that. So that's why I went with those there. And then for everything that's visible up here in the top, I'm using Gelid wings because they undervolt quite gracefully. They're easy to clean. You can actually pop the blades right off them if you want to clean them, which is quite, okay, I'm not going to do it now, but that's quite nice. And they're reasonably quiet even at load. They also come with really nice rubber grommets, so it was quite a chore to do this one, but the rubber grommets are installed on the back ones, and then the one on the inside, where normally in the TJ07 you slide the fans in and then screw them in, I had to get the fans in, so I had to actually bend that cage open, force the fans in, somehow thread all the little rubber grommets through, and then bend the cage back shut. I'd cut my hands every time I've had to do that. And cable managing is kind of a nightmare as well because there's only a little tiny like gap left where you can slip a wire through it. Liquid cooling components. I think that's pretty much it for the water. Oh yes, that's not it. So the sort of the centerpiece of this rig is an APOGEE GTZ from Swiftech. That is the gold-plated limited edition of it. I got number 169. I also had it altered a little bit, so the hold down plate is normally just, I think it's more of a flat powder coat, but I've got Mountain Mods' black wrinkle powder coat, which matches the outside of the case, put on there aftermarket. So I figured if I'm sending in the case, I might as well send in that piece too. The only thing in here that I could have powder coated, I think that I didn't, is the casing for the optical drive. That I just spray painted. It still kind of bothers me when I look at it, but not that huge of a deal, I guess. And then I already mentioned the MCP 655 or D5 pump in the bottom. I do really recommend if you're going to go with a D5 pump that you go with the variable speed one. Not only does it go to a higher RPM than the fixed one, which is fixed at about 4 out of 5 of the variable one, but when you turn it down all the way, I keep mine all the way down. You're only going to lose a couple degrees to a few degrees of temperatures, and it is extremely quiet. It's one of the, people talk about this all the time, and it drives me crazy. Like, the internet doesn't know silent. Silent is silent, and not silent is not silent. MCP 350s are not silent. DDCs are not silent at all. They're loud. And this one, when you turn it down, is legitimately extremely quiet, almost silent. I mean, my mic's on my chest here. That's what my rig sounds like. Nothing. That is satisfactory. Anything else is not silent. So there's that. I think that's pretty much it for like the component choices. So let's talk about the case. The origin of this case. I've had a lot of people ask me, why do you use that TJ07? That thing is ancient. And you're right. It was a gift from my wife way back when we were dating. It was the first big ticket item present that she ever bought me. So there's some sentimental value there. And then there's also the fact that I personally don't think a better case has been made yet. And better is a subjective word. It means different things to different people. To me, better means a combination of a lot of things. It means the design, it means the build quality, it means the craftsmanship that went into it. Are there cases with better features than this one that are perhaps more water cooling friendly? You don't have to mount your front radiator with Velcro and your bottom radiator with, well, also Velcro. Yes, there are better cases in terms of features these days, but the manufacturing feat of this single unibody piece that goes all the way from the back of the top to the back of the bottom and is a single thick piece of aluminum has not been replicated since the TJ07, except by the TJ11, which I have a whole set of problems with, aside from it being too big for me. I just don't find it as, space efficient as the TJ07, and I don't want anything bigger. I mean, this thing already weighs 59 pounds full of hardware. I don't need anything any bigger or any heavier. So that's my whole thing there. So the craftsmanship of it is something that I really appreciate. I don't really like plastic if I don't have to use it. And the other thing is, why would I need to upgrade? I've had a lot of people tell me, why don't you get a Switch 810? Well, because the Switch 810 is plastic for one thing, and for two, I think it's pretty gaudy looking, whereas this is a very clean, very classical look, and it fits all the hardware I need. People are like, oh, the Switch 810 fits this and this. I don't care. I'm running one graphics card, it's sort of normal EATX board. I don't have an XL ATX board. I have 6 fans, 6 120 millimeter fans worth of radiator to cool a GPU and a CPU. Like, that's it. So it's already extremely silent. What do I need more for? So anyway, that's why I still have the TJ07. There are some things where people have a good point though. I've spent way too much on this TJ07. I mean, back in like my first build that I did in it, where I really wanted to like go crazy on it, I wanted to get the mid plate actually polished. So it's like a raw aluminum stock, and I wanted to get it polished to a mere shine. I'd seen it done before and it looked really, really good. So the place I took it to get that done, they completely screwed it up. They made a total mess of it and it was like completely unusable. So that was the point where I was like, okay, well, I will have to powder coat the interior. So I went to Mountain Mods, I got them to powder coat the interior. This was all like the first time. The outside still had the very beautiful stock anodized aluminum finish on it. So when that got beat up and it was time to redo the build anyway, and I was gonna tear the whole thing apart, that's another thing that's great about the TJ07. Again, features that aren't on a spec sheet, it can be taken apart completely. It is assembled with screws, not with rivets. So, but when it came time to take it apart again, I was like, okay, I'm gonna send the whole thing away. I wanna get it powder coated for the outside, but the inside was all beat up from upgrading hardware and, you know, dinging it and stuff like that. So I started looking into how to get powder coating stripped. Whew. Extremely expensive, involves like chemical baths, and there's like no guarantees that the parts will even make it. So I took a gamble. They came out okay, but I think it cost me a couple $100. Like, it was ridiculous. But only there's, so one of these PCI screws, it's not really threaded anymore. I just have like some Loctite in there so that it stays. And then other than that, it survived the chemical bath pretty well. So I sent it away to Mountain Mods to be coated again. And other than one screw up on the right side panel, which looks pretty ugly, it actually came out really, really well. I think their black wrinkle finish is one of the most beautiful powder coating finishes available. It actually uses quite a glossy paint, but then there's so much texture to the finish that the light scatters really well, and it ends up having more like a net matte effect anyway. So that cost me another, I don't know, $150 or whatever like that. And people kind of look at it and go, well, you could have just bought yourself a new case because you powder coated it once, stripped the powder coating off, powder coated it again. I'm just like, yeah, you're probably right. But you can't achieve this case with the changes that I've made to it, including the cable management in the back, and well, mostly the cable management in the back is all that I really added to it, without buying a TJ07 and getting it powder coated anyway. So buying a new TJ07 still costs like $350 or $400 or whatever, so there you go. I might as well just reuse this one. One other change I did make to the case is the front I/O. I've completely done away with the audio ports because I'm using an Objective 2 and ODAC now, so I don't need the front audio on my case. So all I have in there is 2 USB 3 ports, which is something that the case doesn't come with by default. This little door right here is actually kind of a funny story. Once I had the case painted, the buildup of the paint made it so that the stock magnet wasn't strong enough to attract the door and cause it to close, so it would just fall open. So I had to sand down the powder coating on the steel piece inside the door, and then I had to go steal a fridge magnet that had a rare earth magnet in it. It was one of those cute little like bulletin board tack ones that has a rare earth magnet in it. So I just like cut that thing open and then steal the magnet out of it, and then the magnet was too big to fit, so I had to like file it down and like super glue it in there, and that's the only reason that front door closes. So that was pretty janky. Front bays are just mounted with like wood screws, basically. There's a lot of things that are super imperfect about the machine, but I think that's part of what gives it character, right? Let's talk cable management at the back. So there's a lot of stuff back here. There's the temp probes that help me control the fan speeds. There's all the fans, so every fan in the system is plugged in the back here somehow. So I think down here I have handmade adapters so that all 4 fans on the bottom radiator can be combined into a single lead to come up to the top up here, and then everything else kind of runs back here as well. The T-balancer is something I get asked about a lot. It's a real bear to configure. I don't recommend that people buy it unless they want to fight with it for probably a good 3 to 6 hours to really get it working properly. But once you do, I've had this thing for a few years now and I've hardly even touched it. So, it's great for what it is. It's not great for a lot of the other things that it is. I guess I don't really have too much else to say. I'm just kind of looking at some of the other sort of notes that I have for myself. Oh, so there's some kind of funny little imperfections in Ghetto Solutions. I get asked by quite a few people how to keep their graphics card from sagging, and the solution that I managed to come up with is really, really stupid. I took like a little piece of, it's a piece of a V checkpoint, so it actually is like a wrapped rubber little metal piece inside, and I jammed it in between the PCI slot rear bracket piece and a DVI port. And what that did is it gave the graphics card a little bit of extra support, so it ends up being a little bit straighter. It doesn't make that much of a difference though. And the rear side panel, it's really funny because it's almost impossible to close. So is this something that Steve Jobs would be proud of? I don't think so, but is it something that serves me extremely well and has been worth the effort? Oh, I don't know. It serves me well. I don't know if it was worth the effort, but I think that pretty much wraps it up. That is the end of Personal Rig Update 2012, and it is very unlikely that I will be touching my personal rig anytime in the next probably couple of years, other than maybe a graphics card upgrade. That's something that people ask me about a lot as well, is why'd you go so ghetto? Why are you just using, regular PrimoFlex tubing and curves like this, when the fashion these days is to use angled fittings and very straight tubing runs? And I love that. I think it looks fantastic. But the issue is that I've always been of a philosophy that something that's your actual daily driver rig has to be very easily upgradable. So this approach gives me a lot more flexibility in terms of if I want to do a GPU swap. I can probably get a GPU swap done in 20 minutes tops. And whereas if you have all hard piping tubing, it's pretty much impossible. It's a real nightmare. I can just take my CPU block off. I can do a CPU swap in 8 minutes. So stuff like that, making sure that the system is upgradable and something that I can continue to add to in the future is something that I've always kind of thought about as I've built up this machine. Although I think now we've reached the point where I'm really not going to make too many changes to it, other than when Star Citizen launches, I'll be putting in a whatever makes sense at that point. We'll see how things shake down with Mantle and DirectX 12 and whatever graphics card ends up going in there. That's pretty much it, guys. Sorry for the super long video. Like it if you liked it. Disliked it if you disliked it. Leave a comment and let me know if you have anything to say about the rig. Obviously, I'll be reading the comments pretty carefully on something that's, about my own sort of pride and joy here. Don't forget, you can support Linus Media Group by contributing to us monthly to allow me to build more computers like this, evidently. Actually, it's funny. Okay, before I finish the video, I'll tell you guys which ones are samples and which ones I actually legitimately paid for. So you can do that. You can buy t-shirts. You can change your... Sorry, my cameraman fell asleep at the wheel over there, so the SD card got all filled up because he made that last shot take so long. So I was just going to say, as always, guys, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. And then now I don't even remember the story I was going to tell. What was it? Oh yeah, which stuff like I legitimately paid for and which stuff was samples. Okay, so we'll go through part by part. The case has cost me a grand total of, and my now wife, so because it was bought initially, has cost like easily about $1,000 up till now. Like, but when you consider that it's made it through quite a few builds, and that's been over a span of like 5 years now, or however long it's been, 4 or 5 years, it's like buying a new really nice case every year, I guess. That's how I can justify that to myself. The radiator in the front, like I said, was part of my very first water cooling setup. The optical drive I bought. The T-Virus reservoir, I'm just trying to remember. No, that was a sample, so I did that one as that was an unboxing. The motherboard itself was a sample from ASUS. The RAM came from Crucial. The CPU, again, I would not recommend running an Extreme Edition unless you get them as like an engineering sample and you don't have anything else to do with them, then you throw them in your rig. The water block, that APOGEE, I actually had SwiftTech offer to send me one of these limited edition, which they only did 200 of them, gold plated. And I was like, nope, Gabe, I can't do that. I have to buy it. I must buy it because otherwise I won't feel worthy to own such a very, very cool piece of computer hardware. So I paid for the CPU block, all the fittings as well. Those are really expensive, the true silver fittings. The Titan and the Coolants block were things that we used for a video. And then the Sennheiser sound card, that came with that came as like a bundle with a headset for my wife. The RAID card, yeah, that was my problem. And then the SSDs, oh, spent $1,000 on those. That was one of the biggest computer purchases I've ever made, was buying all those 8 SSDs at once. But it was a really good deal. Like, to this day, it still holds up pretty well from a price to performance standpoint, this whole solution. So it was about $1,500 total or so, because I was able to get those drives for under $1 per gig, because it was like a crazy refurb blowout. This is back in SandForce 1 days, getting them under $1 per gig. It was a really good deal. So I was like, okay, this is my opportunity. I'm gonna get my ultimate SSD setup, 900 gigs SSD, super fast. I went for it, so it was like crazy balls. This radiator was a purchase, those fans were a purchase, the XFX power supply was a sample, so, but I would have bought one if I wasn't able to get one otherwise, but don't tell XFX that. And I think that pretty much wraps it up. So there you go, guys. The benefits of being a YouTuber, yes, you do get a bunch of samples, which is really, really cool, but, oh, I bought the T-Balancer as well, but it also forces you to like buy other stuff to go with it. Well, it doesn't force you, but it, you know, yeah, and it's like getting a job somewhere where you have like a great staff discount. You end up spending more there, even though you have your staff discount, than you would have if you just didn't work there and didn't go there every day. So, all right, I think I'm done now. Yes, I'm done now.